From the kitchen of the cabin, a look at the games that made us who we are in Ben and Steve's Advent Calendar.
Oh, Steve. Breathe in the atmosphere, Steve. Do you hear that? Let's just don't say anything for a second. I know you like to fucking talk, but don't say anything for a second. We'll let the listeners drink in the atmosphere. All right, that's enough.
What about the smells? The smells of the Weihnachtsmarkt. They can't smell it.
Tell the people where we are, Stevie.
You could have the world's first
Smell-O-Vision podcast.
Exactly.
That would be amazing.
Smellcast. There's probably a way we could package it. Like, if you're like a backer on Patreon, right?
Yeah, I
at
could
a certain
send you
tier.
I could send you like a burning log through the post.
The smells of 5G for D. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
Get on patreon.com/5G4D. The smells of 5G4D.
What tier is that going to be?
It's going to be like at least 15 quid a month.
Okay, so what are the smells? We've got the sort of the smell of burning wood at the Weihnachtsmarkt.
Yeah.
What else? What else do we have?
Well, we have brimstone.
Brimstone for what?
Hasatan.
Yeah, exactly. Like Sweaty Ben, maybe?
I'm very clean.
Yeah?
I shower at least once a day.
No Ben B.O.?
I don't. Have you ever smelled B.O. on me?
No, I guess not, actually. I guess you smell pretty good. You know, but cologne, Eau de Ben.
I use Hugo Boss cologne.
Don't tell them.
Oh, sorry. They've got a guess.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't call it cologne. I call it aftershave,
Yeah,
like a good European.
Bunch of middle-aged men farting.
Yeah.
That'd be in there.
The frozen head of Meeple Pete.
Yep.
I don't know what the freezing liquid smells like.
Now, I think it's Simon Games is selling an actual candle with the new board game scent.
Oh, really?
It's a new board game scented candle. So it's a thing. It's a thing that we can capitalize on.
Hey, not Tim Hutchins. Tim from sirmeeple.com.
Yeah.
Get on this, listen to this.
Yeah.
I need a scented candle by the end of the month.
Yeah, we need to explore a whole new domain of swag.
Like menswear.
5G4D menswear.
Can you imagine?
Like underwear for so I find it very uncomfortable to sit in my boxer shorts all day playing a game, sweating.
Right.
It's like, it's itchy down there.
Exactly.
I'm like shifting my legs in the chair. It gets uncomfortable. I need activewear for board gaming.
Right, exactly. Oh, can you imagine a good 5G4D pair of tracky bottoms? Can you imagine that?
It's more like inactive wear.
Right.
We need a whole line of inactive wear for the leisure pursuing male.
And female.
Yeah.
Unisex tracky bottoms.
Yeah, I'm feeling for myself I need this product, but I think
I haven't looked at
probably afflicts everyone.
I haven't looked at my YouTube stats where it breaks it down by gender, but last time it was quite a man thing, 5G4D.
We need to improve that next year.
Absolutely.
So all you out there, you need to tell a female friend, your wife, a girlfriend. We want all the genders listening to while paying for 5G4D.
Yeah, I mean, whether you listen or not is completely by the by.
Yeah.
So I asked you a question.
It's up to you, the listener, to make sure that this happens and we increase the number of people paying for this podcast.
So I asked you a question.
And their diversity.
And you didn't answer it.
What was the question?
Explain to the people where we are.
That's not a question.
All right, I commanded you.
Yeah. We are at the 2022 edition of the Revalerstraße Historische Weihnachtsmarkt in Berlin, the historical Christmas market. My favorite Christmas market of all the Berlin Christmas markets. And being reunited never felt so good, Ben.
Oh, so yeah, for the listeners, Steve's first day back in Germany after he got back from Hackensack, New Jersey.
Hackensack, New Jersey, where I was there for 2 weeks, and in Manhattan 3 weeks before that, but not doing anything cool in Manhattan for the most part. Just hanging out, avoiding COVID, and taking care of sick family members. But this morning I re-arrived back in Berlin. This is my first stop.
Of course. This is for the listeners. So Germany does Christmas markets, and Berlin does Christmas markets, and they're mostly fine. But this one is amazing. It's traditional. It has jugglers and fire breathers.
It's got wood chips on the floor.
It has wood chips on the floor. It has what are they called? Like the round things that you burn stuff in.
those. It's got those
braziers.
Braziers, yeah.
Braziers everywhere. It's got over there a kids Ferris wheel. You can buy mead.
It's got food, drinks, games, fun. Kids, adults, all of society is here, pretending it's the Middle Ages because this is Germany and that's what you do here.
Right. So on that, I'm going to take the listeners on a journey. We are currently in the Middle Ages of Germany.
Or you were in Germany.
A slightly damp Berlin night. But
Or we're in Berlin at night.
But I'm going to put them on a plane with propellers. And I'm going to take them across the Atlantic, over to the American coast, and I'm going to fly them south, Steve, down past Hollywood, into the Caribbean, and onto a non-specific island that probably produce bananas as a main food crop.
We are here to talk about a game.
Yes, what game is that,
We are
Stephen?
not here to simply divert from the main topic at hand.
And crudely stereotype people of the Caribbean.
No, that's for the board game designers, not for us.
Exactly.
We are mere commentators and aficionados.
Indeed.
The game that we are going to talk about today is a game that I do not think I have played in at least 25 years.
I've only heard of it.
It retains a grip on my board gaming imagination. And I know that there's been a new edition of it.
Yeah.
I know nothing about the new edition. I have only ever played the first, I think, 1979 maybe edition of West End Games, Junta.
All right, so there are going to be many people listening to this who have heard of Junta, probably.
Yeah.
There are going to be many people listening to this who haven't heard of Junta. And there are going to be many people, I think there are going to be fewer people who have played it. Now, I was told the big problem with Junta is that it's a great idea executed poorly. Am I wrong?
You can say that about a lot of things, Ben. Like episodes of this podcast that don't feature me, for example.
Are you telling me my interview with recently gone up with Empire journalist Dan Jolin was poorly executed?
I haven't listened to it yet. Well, I'm a bit behind.
I can tell you it wasn't.
So, Junta is diplomacy, but fun.
Okay. I mean, I love diplomacy, but carry on.
So then we need to play Junta. We need to play Junta this holiday season. I'm sure that the criticisms of it are apt. It's a game that was designed in 1979.
Right.
But this game is fun and funny. So each player in the game takes a different role in the government of this non-specific,
Banana Republic, right?
South American Banana Republic, right? And every turn you get the president, one of the players is the president, gets a certain amount of foreign aid. I'm holding up scare quotes right now, money. And you don't know, none of the other players know how much money it is. You just draw from this face down money pile, and the president looks at the money and tells the other players how much they're getting each turn. You know, oh, it was a great year, we got a lot of aid, you're going to get this much, you're going to get this much. Or he looks at the money, or she looks at the money, sees like a ton of money came in this year, but says, you know what, it's a really rough year, I'm not going to be able, the budget's going to be a lot lower this year than it was last year. You're all getting one, and you player who tried to assassinate me last turn, you're getting nothing, right? So this game combines this aspect of diplomacy with like some like modest onboard action where you're trying to like take over the palace
and this money you're trying to sort of snaffle away into your Swiss bank account. Is that the...
Yeah. So every turn you have to decide where you are going to go, right? You can go to the Chamber of Deputies, like the Presidential Palace. You can go to the bank. There are several other locations. I can't remember them all. And if you go to the bank and you end your turn on the bank, you can deposit whatever money you have into your Swiss bank account. And it's only the money in your Swiss bank account at the end of the game that determines who's the winner. There are certain players who have a free assassination attempt per turn. Maybe one player, like the Minister of Security or something.
Right.
I forget. And then you also get cards that allow you to do assassination attempts. If there's a successful assassination, it is an excuse for a coup. And if there's an excuse for a coup, you can call for a coup d'etat.
Right.
And if you get enough players on your side who vote for the coup d'etat, then you have a coup, and then you move units on the board and you try to capture different parts of the board. And then if the coup d'etat is successful, the president is deposed, a new president is elected, blah, 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 who cares?
Okay.
Everything that happens in this game is subject to off-board negotiation with other players.
So,
which makes it like diplomacy, but because of the setting and you're playing for money and like the theme is very like tongue-in-cheek, I just find it much more fun than diplomacy, which just makes me neurotic.
So my question is so we talked about Resistance Avalon, right? Which is a game that gets in, gets out. It's that credo of writing a screenplay, right?
Yeah.
Start the scene as late as possible, end the scene as early as possible, right?
Yeah.
What I've heard about Junta is the big criticism that I've heard is it goes on forever. Is this true?
You could claim this about any game published before like 1990.
Sure.
It goes on. I never felt like it went on forever because I just found it so much fun.
Right.
So enthralling, so engaging.
Because there's no doubt in my mind that diplomacy is too long. It's great fun, but it's too long.
But that's why I say diplomacy, but fun. I think diplomacy is a brilliant game, but it is very, very difficult. And if you, like me, when I played diplomacy, are playing against people who are very good at diplomacy, as back then many people were, you don't have a chance.
So I told this story to you, but I haven't told it to the listeners. I once had a game of diplomacy where a German diplomat turned up, and he absolutely wiped the floor with us.
Do you think it's because he was a diplomat, or he just happened to be good at diplomacy?
I mean, are they mutually exclusive? I don't know. But he was a diplomat, and he was really good at diplomacy.
I would be disturbed to find out that actual diplomacy in real life is nothing more than a game, highly elaborated.
Well, Whatchamafladget played it a lot, didn't he? Kissinger, big fan of diplomacy, used to play it in the Oval Office and that.
I mean, diplomacy is brilliant because it's like such a pure game.
There's no rules.
There's nothing to it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and you could play by mail. I mean, there's something about diplomacy that is like a phenomenon. I feel like from 1953, whenever it was invented, until like, the modern day, probably people played nothing but diplomacy and then some war games.
See, what's really interesting about diplomacy, and we'll get back to Junta in a second, but diplomacy feels like it wasn't designed like a gamer. If you will allow me to bring parallels to the modern age.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason many Euro games now are overwrought and complicated is because they're being designed by gamers in the sense that people who are referring back to designs from the 2000s and just blocking stuff on top of them. Whereas diplomacy is almost pure. It is the first iteration.
It almost isn't a game, at least the way we understand games. I mean, it's like, it's a concept.
There are definite victory conditions and definite strategic moves.
But it's like you said, there are so few rules. It is so much like, it's so conceptual, it's so psychological, it's so like the most perfect example of whatever the fuck that it is.
So it subscribes to a golden age ethos, get as much out of as little as possible. Does Junta subscribe to a silver age ethos?
It's so pre any of these categories of games, golden age, silver age.
Sure.
It's like its own entire category of experience.
But you can put the modern on the past. I mean,
you can be proleptic.
Yeah, exactly. Does Junta subscribe to...
Prolepsis is not the same thing as prolapsus.
Which I've just had, actually, listening to you talk.
Yeah.
So,
But Junta is much more like a game than diplomacy. And you can lie and you can backstab, blah, blah, blah. But it's still more like maybe the war game version of diplomacy, because at a certain point in the game, if there's a coup d'etat, you're rolling dice and moving chits around a board, and you're trying to occupy certain strategic quadrants so that you can control the next government.
Yeah.
It's much gamier than diplomacy in that sense. But when I say it's like diplomacy, but it's fun to have like this certain role. Like, you're not just like Germany or Britain or Belgium or Russia or whatever.
Play Austria.
Or whatever. You have a role, and it might be a different role next turn. And if you're the president, you want to stay the president as long as possible. You're trying to please people and play them off against each other. So it's got those aspects of diplomacy, but forget the theme. The mechanics work differently for a different kind of experience. And because there's some element of randomness to it, I think it's much less intimidating than diplomacy.
So there's a sort of term in board gaming. Something killed something. It says a lot. It's never true, but it says a lot.
For example?
This game is a Dominion killer.
Okay.
I mean, of course it never happens, because Dominion is perfect.
No one's stopping anybody from playing Dominion, or whatever.
But, people say, oh, well, I'm never going to play this game because this game has come along.
Sure.
Do you think modern social deduction games have killed Junta?
Absolutely not. I think maybe modern gaming in general has killed Junta. So Junta is not like other social deduction games because I don't think you're trying to really deduce anything in Junta. Social deduction games to me are like figure out who is like, there are games where you have a hidden goal. I'm trying to figure out what your hidden goal is, but that goal was assigned to you.
Right.
Or you have a role, and I'm trying to figure out what your role is. The kind of like deduction that you're doing in Junta is not the same kind of social deduction. It's more like manipulation.
Right.
Because the goal of Junta is to get as much money as possible.
Right.
It's not to like conquer as much territory as
So
possible.
it's nihilistic in the sense that you know everyone's terrible.
Yes.
And you're just trying to be the worst of the bunch.
Yeah, it's like deeply cynical, in fact, but like all the more amusing for it. In fact, it's like a bit of a parodic game or a satirical game. It's not the kind of game you really see much anymore.
So we live in an age where, because I think, sort of, especially in the West, Western discourse has been gentrified, and it's by and large a bourgeois construct now.
Yeah.
And satire is no longer... Satire is having a bad time because stupid people don't have senses of humour and don't get irony. Do you think that is Junta problematic, sort of in terms of stereotyping certain people, or is it the kind of game that would be considered problematic today?
I think it's obviously going to be considered problematic. Do I think it's actually problematic? I don't know. Like if you take away the sort of Latin American reference framework for it, then I guess you could say it's not problematic. It's simply a parody of how all politics and like much of the world works, if you believe that all politics entertain some degree of corruption.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess like the setting is arguably problematic.
Is it Orientalist to some degree? I mean, in the broad term of Orientalist, I don't mean specifically talking about the Orient, but a Western interpretation of South American society.
It's a very long conversation. I mean, you might say that it's parodic of the kind of countries that my country has more, like the governments of which my country
had undue influence.
Yeah, undue influence has supported, and I don't know. I think we'd probably have to have a much longer, less lighthearted podcast to get into like these kinds of thematics. But at the end of the day, it's not deeply intellectual, which satire can be.
Right.
Actually, it is much more parody than satire.
Right.
So it depends if you have the appetite for this kind of parody. If you think like there's an element of truth to this. And you can stomach it, and you don't want to just say everything all the time is inappropriate, and you shouldn't say the obvious thing even though it's obvious.
So the internet is incredibly reductive, and people are incredibly reductive. So do you think that playing Junta makes you morally corrupt?
Well, I think, playing board games in general is a completely decadent activity when you could be spending your valuable free time doing something to actually improve the world and the lives of others instead of simply moving little cardboard chits around a board. No, what's problematic about Junta isn't the setting or the theme or the gesturing toward broken Latin American pseudo-democracies. It's that it attempts to combine a diplomacy-style game with a war game with randomness and dice rolling, and it's like this sort of like, I don't know, mongrel composition.
Bastard child.
Yeah, it kind of like if you want to be very like strict about it in a way, it doesn't work. But I'm talking about a game that I played and loved in the 90s, and that was sort of like formative of my appreciation for what board games were capable of doing. And I think it was like creative and clever and fun, and I'm willing to set aside the problematic aspects to just like sit with that memory for a little while and maybe share that memory with others, with you, Ben, and with the listeners.
So, this is not relevant because we're going to do the next episode tomorrow. But
what's today?
Today is the 21st.
It is the 20. Is it the solstice or is that the 22nd this year? I didn't check.
21st, yeah.
So the 21st to the 22nd, right?
So it's not relevant, but shall we go and get another drink?
I think so. Let's get another drink, and you know what? Cheers to being back together for the holidays, Ben.
You haven't even kissed me yet.
Thank you for listening to this show and indulging our overweening nostalgia. If you would like to support the show, you can do that by going to patreon.com/5G4D. And we both wish you a very Merry Christmas.